ओमज्ञानतिमिरन्धस्य ज्ञानञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपकदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरु श्रीयुतः पदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातां सहगणा रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधा कृष्णपदान् सहगणा ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितंश्च। हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधो जगतपते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते। तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये। वंशकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवास आदि गौर भक्तवृंद। हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 रामो राम रामो हरे हरे। Hare Krishna. I'd like to welcome all of you to the Journey Home course. We are on the session 4 of the Journey Home course, and we have been discussing the story of His Holiness Rajan Swami Maharaj from his autobiography. And we have reached the point where Maharaj has entered into the Himalayas, and we're going to go deeper into the Himalayan story and see so many things that he has learned while he was in the Himalayas. At some point, when Richard started entering into the deeper jungles of the Himalayan mountains, he once came across a group of 20 people, very powerful looking, very rustic yogis that were no way seeming to be ordinary. They were covered with ashes all over their body. They were carrying tridents, and they were looking very dangerous. And the group of them, they introduced themselves. They were called the Naga Babas. Most of them were completely naked, stark naked, without a single cloth on their body, and they were covered with ashes all over their body, wearing long matted hair and long beards, and they were looking extremely powerful and rugged. Kept shouting Jai Shankar, Jai Shankar. And one of them, who was among the senior among them, who was a person named Dhoni Baba. So he was one of their leaders. And among the Nagababas, there was one particular Nagababa who knew English. And he conversed with Richard and conveyed whatever needed to be conveyed between the Nagababas and Richard. It is explained that they were inviting him to be among the Nagas. So the Naga Sangha is a very extraordinary Sangha. It's not a Sangha where anybody gets invited like that, because they completely detest and stay away from societal norms. They don't follow any of the regular societal norms, and they live a life of seclusion into the mountains. And the Naga Babas have been observing him for quite some time, and they invited him to be staying among them, and they invited him deeper into the jungles, to the um, to the place where the Naga Babas resided together in a gang. It is explained that when Richard was invited to sit among them in the middle of a fire, so usually they live in cold wilderness, and there's practically no sort of shelter. And sometimes the Nagababas light fire and they sit around the fire. For them, the fire is not just a source of warmth, but for them, fire is the presence of the divine. Without knowing any of the cultural contexts and the etiquettes that the Naga Babas followed, Richard very innocently walked towards the fire with his slippers on. And the Naga Babas together started shouting at him. And it was so scary that some of them actually approached him with a trident in his hand. And Richard was so scared. He didn't know what he had done wrong. And then one of the Naga Babas told him that they consider the fire to be their sacred place. And no one was allowed to wear footwear next to the fire. Richard immediately threw away the rubber sandals he was wearing. And from then on, he just didn't wear any footwear. They allowed him to come and sit next to the fire. And they consoled him. They told him, this is our way of teaching people a lesson. We scare a person so much, while teaching the person a particular lesson, that the person never forgets it in his entire life. Richard obviously was convinced that this is a lesson I'm not going to forget in my whole life. Then the Naga Babas started uh, smoking chillam. They had a clay pipe, which they call as chillam, and they were passing it on to each other. And they consider that chillam to be the clay pipe to be something very, very important part of their rituals. And they were very meditatively inhaling the fumes. And when they passed it on to Richard for him to join in their meditation, Richard denied because he had already taken a vow of abstaining from intoxication. And initially, the Naga Baba seemed very offended. But eventually, they smiled and they recognized Richard's desire to abstain from intoxicants and they let it be. The next day, the Naga Babas invited Richard to be a part of their greater Sangha, where the top leader of the Naga Babas was going to come. And Richard was very excited to meet the guru of all the Nagas. And the next day, he met this very powerful looking personality. And around that personality, there were many strange, weird things that were happening in the Naga camp. Richard saw there was one Naga Baba levitating in the air. He sat on the ground, meditating with his eyes closed, and suddenly he just began to rise. There was no sort of support. There was absolutely no sort of holding on to anything. He was raising above against gravity into the air. And there were many other Naga Babas around this person, and none of them seemed to be even bothered about this person levitating in the air. It's not that you see this every second day, somebody is levitating in the air, isn't it? And when Richard saw this person for the first time with his own eyes, he saw this person levitating in the air, he was shocked and bewildered. And right in front of him, there was another person who was also doing the same thing. It seemed it was a very common practice among the Nagas to levitate in the air, and it was had attained mystic siddhis, and they lived a life which was so much in alignment with nature's law that they actually had the facility and the ability to break all the laws. And the next morning, when the Naga Guru came, he invited Richard to be a part of the Naga Babas. He said, Naga is a man. We are inviting you to become a Naga with us. Richard was very touched and he was very, very surprised by the invitation by the Guru of the Nagas for him to be a part of their gang, and which was a very, very special thing among sadhus. Richard, he didn't say anything. He didn't want to offend this person. But at the same time, he felt he is not ready. He was still looking out for a guru whom he felt he could surrender his heart to. And something didn't touch him at this point among the Naga sadhus. He still felt that I need to find my guru. The Naga Baba immediately understood. Richard didn't even have to convey it. He just stood silent and smiled. The Naga Baba immediately understood. And he said, yes, God will help you. And all the Nagababas, they blessed Richard that he will find his path. And they all walked away, leaving Richard alone. And that was one of the most powerful encounters Richard ever came across in the Himalayan ranges. Everywhere in this world, there are people who are outlaws. These are people that don't necessarily have to follow the trend of the world. There were three sadhus, very elderly saints. They lived in an isolated island. And although they were very old, they were very innocent and they had a childlike heart. The villagers loved them and they flocked to visit them. One particular day, a scholar happened to be visiting that particular island. The scholar came to know about these three saints who lived in that particular island. And um, of course, the scholar was, he had not come to meditate or anything like that. He had just come for a holiday to the island. And when he came to know about these three saints, he told his disciples, go and get these two saints. I want to meet them. The disciples went to find these three saints, and they told the three saints is a very big scholar. He has read all the scriptures. He is a very, very powerful person. You must meet him. And the three sadhus became very excited. Yes, yes, we want to meet him. Please take us to him. And these two disciples took the three sadhus to this scholar. And the three sadhus very innocently sat in front of the scholar and said, please tell us something from the scriptures. We're ignorant and illiterate. We don't know anything about the scriptures. We only chant mantras, and the only mantra that we know is a very simple one. The scholar was surprised that they are sadhus, but they still don't know anything about the scriptures and they don't have access to great mantras. And he decided to teach them, taught them so many stories from the scriptures. And eventually, he in fact taught them some very powerful mantras and he asked them to remember them. And then eventually, the sadhus went back and this man continued his holiday. And a couple of days passed. One of the sadhus asked the other sadhu, do you remember the mantra that the scholar taught us? The other sadhu said, sorry, I completely forgot the mantra. I went back to chanting my simple mantra, which I often remember. The three sadhus realized that all three of them had forgotten the mantra completely. And they decided, before that scholar leaves the island, let's go and ask him back. And they ran to meet the scholar with great eagerness. They were so excited and so eager to meet the scholar that they completely forgot that there was water over there. And they just ran over the water and reached the boat of the scholar. And when the disciples on the boat and the scholar saw these three sadhus running over water to come to meet him, they were beyond shocked. They welcomed the sadhus on board, and the sadhus said, we are such foolish and ignorant people that we completely forgot the mantras that you had taught. Please, can you teach us the mantra again? And we promise you we won't forget the mantra this time. The scholar, he was totally bewildered. He said, my dear saints, whatever mantra you have been chanting, please continue to chant. Forget all the knowledge that I gave you. Forget all the gyan that I gave you. Just focus on the mantra that you chanted with great faith. And that is more powerful than any other knowledge that you need in this world. Many times, people, they think that scholarship can lead to greatness. But actually, simplicity and faith leads to greater greatness than anything else. The sadhus who live in the jungles, the sadhus who live in the Himalayas, they're not great scholars necessarily. Yes, they will have great knowledge also, but that is not their identity. The identity comes from faith. And all that they're able to do is simply because of that strong faith that they have within the heart. From the camp of the Nagas, Richard came, back to the higher realms of the Himalayan mountains, and he reached a place called Badrinath. When he was on his way towards Badrinath, he found the path was practically impossible to, walk on, and it was practically impossible for him to reach Badrinath. So he came back to Rishikesh, and on his way to Rishikesh, he came across a place called Swargashram. And over there, he was um, with a group of sadhus lying there, taking some rest, had some prasad, and while he was taking some rest, suddenly a yogi in his early 30s began to come around and begging villagers for some charity. He kept asking many villagers for charity, but all the villagers were least bothered. They didn't they were like not really focusing on him. Some gave him some small amount of change and stuff like that. And this man suddenly he got very upset, and he uh, he created a major ruckus over there and gathered a lot of people together. The moment people's attention was caught, he immediately began to demonstrate things that were beyond crazy. He climbed up a stool, he pulled out a bulb. This is a live bulb that was on, it was hot. He removed the bulb. He held the bulb in his hand, crushed it. Usually, when you crush any glass, it breaks and it cuts your hands, isn't it? You can't crush glass and get away with it. When this man crushed the bulb, it became powder, literally. And what he did next was even more shocking. He took that powder, put it in his mouth, held a glass, put it in the Ganga, and drank the glass of Ganga water, and into the whole glass, the powder of the bulb. People were going mad looking at what he just did. And then he did something even more worse. He found a metal rod, an iron rod, and he took that iron rod and he placed the iron rod on one of his eyes, and he placed the other end of the rod on a wall, and he began to walk towards that wall, and the iron rod literally bent, and his eyes, the other part of the iron rod was on his eyes. Obviously, anyone who does that, that person will go blind, isn't it? The iron rod will go right inside the eyes. The eyes are very, very delicate. An iron rod of that power, it's not easy. The iron rod bent, and then he, just took out the iron rod from his eyes. He put a cloth over there, and he opened his eyes completely fine, as if nothing had happened. Just some redness, a little bit of redness in his eyes. People were going mad. They began to give out so much money to this man, looking at the mysticism and the power that he was exuding. Eventually, this man began to speak to you know to Richard, and he explained that for 20 years he lived with his guru in the Himalayas and in a cave in the Himalayas. The guru took note that he was using his powers for gaining some prestige and monetary gains. And the guru told him, "You're not fit to be here. Get out, go back into society, and take up a regular job. Don't pursue this mystic, powers, and don't pursue this yogic way of life." Obviously, now this man went away from the ashram, went back to society, but now he had no other idea of how to raise money, what work to do other than magic. And he was resorting to magic to attract money. And that had displeased his guru so much. The spiritual master, every spiritual master, has some expectations from a guru, from a student. The question is, am I a student that seeks wonders, or am I a student who seeks wisdom? A lot of us, when we come into the path of spirituality, we seek wonder. There been some magic happening in our life, then some miracle that we want to share that only happened with me, how God is special to me and kind to me. This is all what we want from God. And this is all what we expect from the path of spirituality. And if that doesn't happen, we get upset. And if it happens, we consider ourselves to be very special. Um, but when a guru looks at a disciple, the guru has some expectations from the disciple. And what are the expectations the guru has from the disciple? Primarily two things. First is the guru expects eagerness from a disciple, the eagerness to practice spiritual life, the eagerness to learn scriptures, the eagerness to serve, the eagerness to practice your sadhana. There may be 25 pots on a table, but if you're not thirsty, what good are those pots? Even if the pots are filled with water, what good is it for you if you're not thirsty? So if you're not thirsty for spiritual growth, what good is a guru who is a pot of divine knowledge? So first, we must develop thirst for spiritual knowledge. And when we develop thirst for spiritual knowledge, the spiritual master reveals knowledge to us. The scriptures are like paddy that is removed from the fields. It has to be manually removed. And after removing the paddy from the field, there will be a lot of husk and other things. The knowledge that we gain from books and other sources are like getting rice from a shop. But knowledge that we get from the mouth of a teacher, of a guru, is like cooked rice. So when you go to the spiritual master, to the teacher teaches us knowledge that is already that is easy to digest, provided we have the eagerness to learn from it. If we don't have the eagerness to learn, no guru, however knowledgeable, can give us that knowledge. So, Richard learned from this particular student, disciple, who had disappointed his guru so much that, this is not exactly the way that a disciple should behave. Before finding the right guru, one must know what it means to be a good disciple. And that is what Richard learned from this particular person. The guru does not have to speak a lot to convince us of who we are or what we should do. The guru just speaks very little, but an expert disciple immediately understands. There was a man who used to visit a temple very often, and at one particular point of time, he stopped visiting the temple. The guru decided to visit him and find out what happened. It was a very chilly evening. When the guru visited this man, he was alone at home and he was sitting in front of a blazing fire. It was very cold outside. This blazing fire was providing him warmth. The man welcomed the guru home and led him to a chair next to the fireplace. And the guru and this man were sitting next to the fireplace. And the guru was observing the fireplace. He picked up a tong, and from the fireplace, he picked out a small piece of coal which was burning red hot. He picked up that piece of coal from that fire, he put it outside and said nothing. This man just watched that piece of coal from red hot coal. It was becoming more diminished. And slowly, it became completely black and dead. There was absolutely no fire at all in it. And eventually, the guru picked up that cold piece of coal and put it back into the fire. And the moment he put it back into the fire, it became red hot like fire again. The guru didn't say anything. He just got up and walked away. This man immediately looked at the guru at the door and he said, I understood what you're telling me. I'll come back to the temple from next time onwards. And the guru walked away smiling. What just happened? The guru didn't speak anything, but he gave him a very important instruction and a very important lesson. That man represents, the coal represents the man, or any of us for that matter. But as long as we are in the fire of association, we remain Krishna consciousness, we remain very powerfully spiritual. But the moment we take off, when we are taken off from that fire and put outside, without any association, without any kind of spiritual atmosphere, that particular piece of coal becomes damp, loses its fire, and becomes cold and black. The only thing that coal needs to do to regain its fire is jump back into the association of devotees. That's all the guru told, and he walked away. So, the spiritual master is expert in conveying things to us. We must have the eagerness to understand them, but we also must have the intelligence to realize or absorb what will please our spiritual master, what is the expectation of a spiritual master from us. And that realization comes when we are very deeply connected to the spiritual master and we understand the mood of the spiritual master. This man obviously did not understand, and naturally, he really messed up and disappointed his guru. Richard continued from there and uh, went back to Delhi. He had remained in the Himalayas for 4 months. In those 4 months, between Rishikesh and higher up in the Himalayan mountains, Richard had learned so much. In 4 months, he felt he had grown by ages, by decades, literally. And by this time, he had grown long hair, he had grown a beard, his clothes were unkempt, completely rustic. He had met great saints like Kailash Baba and Tatwala Baba and the Naga Babas. So many plethora of saints learned from the Ganga, learned from the mountains, learned ways of living in the jungles, learned the Hare Krishna Mahamantra from the river, and so many amazing realizations that he had on his way. After 4 months, when he came back to a city like Delhi, he was not ready for what he was going to experience. Over there, he bumped into a person that he had met long back. His name was Cien. Cien was a traveling friend that he had met many months back. And he was, so they had met briefly in London. And after that, they were meeting here in this particular street on in New Delhi. There's a place known as Connaught Place. And when Richard met Cien, they began to converse. The conversation was strange. Here was Cien speaking about everything that a normal youngster in that era would speak. Everything from politics and everything from music and everything about his travels and what he was eating and where he was staying and the fun that he was having. Richard had nothing like that to share because his experience was totally different. 4 months living with the sadhus, the kind of intensity, the kind of lifestyle, the kind of language, the kind of cultural context and food habits, everything was different. For that few minutes that the two of them spent in front of each other, the conversation that they had was so difficult and so weird. Richard started feeling, I don't connect with this person at all. I don't connect with this world at all. I don't relate to this world at all. And suddenly, next moment, he realized, what am I doing? I'm judging him. I am judging him for who he is. But rather, I should be thinking that he is able to speak whatever he is based on his experiences. And I'm able to speak whatever I'm speaking based on my experiences. If I'm going to judge him based on my experiences, how is it fair on him? And if he's going to judge me based on his experiences, how is it fair on me? And Richard that day had a very powerful and a very important realization. He prayed that he should not fall into this vicious trap of being judgmental. He realized that the tendency to criticize was so strong that he may not agree with Cien's ideas or ways, but he should respect him as a soul that originated from the same divine source as him. And he should respect him as a soul who is on his own journey. And that little discussion that he had with Cien and the realization he had after that was so powerful that Richard never forgot it for the rest of his life. Every one of us are different, isn't it? Um, there was a man who had a car dealership shop, and he had a very interesting experience to share. So he said that every person that walked into the showroom walked in differently. There were many salespeople that would judge people who walked in based on their attire. If someone walked in with very good clothes, they would pay attention to them and they would really treat them nicely, go out of the way to make them comfortable. But if someone came with very simple, basic type of clothes or even traditional clothes, they didn't give them so much attention. But this shop owner's experience of life was many times the people that come with the simplest of clothes, they are the ones who actually buy the car and walk away. And those who come with very, very, high end branded clothes, etc., they many times they just are window shopping. They're not really into buying. And this man said, I realized I can never judge anyone by the way they look because deep within, each one is different. Richard, that day, he decided that never in his life he will judge anybody based on externals and without understanding who they are and what their situation of life is. And more importantly, not compare himself with anybody else and unnecessarily criticize someone else based on his own experiences of life. Um, there was a small kid that was in a fair with his parents, and there was a balloon seller who was selling balloons. He had all colors of balloons: red, blue, green, white, black, all colors of balloons. And when he saw this little kid staring at those balloons, this man, he would, release one balloon in the air. And when this kid would see this little balloon flying in the air, he would go mad. He ran to this balloon seller and he kept watching. And one after another, this balloon seller was releasing different balloons. They were releasing a red balloon and a green balloon, a white balloon. And this kid very innocently asked this man, will the yellow one also fly as high as the other color balloons? This man looked at the kid and said, my dear child, it doesn't depend on the color of the balloon. What it depends on is what is inside the balloon. If what is inside the balloon is air, all the balloons will fly, no matter what their colors are. Similarly, what is true for balloons is also true for people. Appearances don't matter. It is what is within that makes the difference. That's a lesson that we all must remember. When we look at other people and when we look at ourselves, look deeper, look within. It isn't the color of the balloon that matters. It's what is inside that really matters. And that's what Richard decided to do from that point onwards. From Delhi, he boarded a train to Varanasi and he reached this ancient city of Varanasi. He had heard so much about this place and he was really excited and very eager to be in Varanasi. When he reached Varanasi, this ancient city, he had not prepared for what he was about to experience. When he reached there, at a particular place, he heard screaming of a lady. There was someone was crying so loudly, and he was, this lady was wailing so much. Richard was shocked at the loudness of the wail, the intensity of the wail. That's when he realized this was a funeral procession passing through a narrow alley towards the river. There was a corpse lying on a bamboo stretcher, and four people were carrying on their shoulders. And there were men who were walking behind, very sober, trying to restrain their emotions. And behind them were women who were sobbing uncontrollably. Seeing their suffering, Richard was very affected and he decided to follow behind and find out what exactly is going to happen in the funeral procession. Uh, he followed them and he reached the the ghats of the Ganga River in Varanasi. And when he was in one of the burning ghats in Varanasi, he began to think about the mystery of death. He saw the entire act of the burning of the dead body, the whole funeral procession. He saw in great detail, and it was really, because in the Western world, things are not so gross. People are decorated very beautifully. The bodies are very beautifully decorated. There's a lot of soberness. There is a lot of sophistication. There's a lot of beauty. In fact, there are processes of beautification of the body, in the last stage. But over here, on the banks of the Manikarnika Ghat in Varanasi, it was very gross and open. People were not scared of facing death because people understood death is the ultimate reality. And he heard that in Varanasi, if anyone dies, Lord Shiva comes and personally chants the name of Ram. Richard was so fascinated by the way the entire ritual was carried out, and he could actually see the body burning right in front of his eyes. He saw how the hair was burning first, he saw how the skin was burning, the different smells that were coming out as the body was burning. He saw the bones, cracking. He heard the sound of the skull crack, and every little bit fascinated Richard. He had never ever experienced death this close and this powerfully. He decided to sit on the banks of the Manikarnika Ghat the entire day. From morning to night, he sat there watching bodies burn, one after another, one after another, one after another. Richard realized the futility of the physical form. And he realized we cannot be this body. We have to be something beyond this body. And he really decided that uh, he is going to prioritize understanding the life beyond death. Um, it's not that and he realized that every person that comes over there with the body, there is so much of love and affection, and that love and affection is not to the body, but it is the soul that has just passed away. The body is simply a temporary vehicle, and all of these realizations Richard was having right on the ghats, the Manikarnika Ghat, on the banks of the Ganga. And this was something that stayed with Richard as a powerful reflection, reminding about the futility of life and reminding about how important it is to prioritize very important and very critical things that should be prioritized over the temporary and fleeting things of this world. How aware am I of the impermanence of life? Most people, they don't want to be aware of the impermanence of life. In fact, most people live life in such a way, it is in a high state of unawareness. They're not aware and they're not even wanting to be aware of the higher aspects of life. We should not remember death with fear, but with reverence. When we remember death not with fear but with reverence, it changes the way you live life today. Every one of us must ask ourselves today, if everything we hold it just turns to ashes, what really should we put our energy on? If you really want to know what to prioritize on, just imagine that tomorrow onwards, nothing is going to remain with you. You're going to die. You're not going to be able to hold on to anything. So you have only one day left. What would you prefer doing that one day? How would you prefer living that one single day? And that will define what your purpose is. That will define how what you cherish in your life. There was a small city in India where there was a king that had raided that small village, and the army of this king had raided and had surrounded the entire village, and all the villagers were assembled together in one particular place. And this king had a policy. Of course, while conquering the village, hundreds of people were killed. But after the conquest was over and the village was captured, the king of that particular army, he had a policy. His policy was very simple. No one touches the women and the kids. No one touches the women and kids and old people. All the men of the village will die. So now the women and the children and the old people were all asked, they were all given a warning. They were told, next day at sunrise, all of you must leave the village. And when you leave the village, you can carry with you one bag. Every single person is allowed to carry just one single bag. You can carry whatever you want in that bag and leave. You will not be touched, you will not be harmed. And everything else that is left back in the village is mine. All the women, the old ladies, and the small children, they were leaving the next morning. And when they were leaving, this man, this king, came there to see the procession walk out. Every lady that was walking out was carrying on her head a really massive size bag. Obviously, the king didn't prescribe 15 kilos of bag. He didn't mention anything like that. He only said one bag. He didn't mention the size of bag. Most people imagine if airlines, function like that, how much weight people would be carrying. So the king had no specification. So obviously the women took advantage of it, carrying such massive loads on their head. The king was shocked. They were wobbling. They were not able to walk also properly carrying such a big load. The king said, all of you all put it down. Put your bags down. I want to see what's in your bag. What is it? Such wealth that you're carrying. You're practically carrying a whole house inside that. And when they opened their bags, the king was shocked to see inside that bag, each lady was carrying her husband, her grown up sons. All the men of the village were in those bags. The king was shocked. He said, what? This is what you're carrying? You didn't carry money. You didn't carry wealth. You didn't carry all the expensive stuff, the gold and all the stuff. The woman said, in the culture in which we are raised, we are taught that love and relationships are more important than anything else in this world. And therefore, we only want, our men and nothing else we want. You can keep everything else. This king was so much touched by that one experience. He decided to let this village go. He walked out of the village, leaving the villagers, leaving all of them to go back to their houses and not looting the village at all. If you have to leave everything today and walk out right now, what would you carry with you? That is a meditation that each one of us must have. Imagine you're sitting on the banks of the Manikarnika Ghat and looking at these dead bodies. Each one of them have had aspirations. Each one of them probably thought that they will never die. Each one of them had so many plans for the next 10 years, probably 20 years, probably. And suddenly one day, something happens and they lose everything. The question that we have to ask ourselves is, what if I only had one day left? What would I want to do? What would I want to carry? And what would I want to not do? And that will teach us a lot about life and our priorities. Richard eventually, he from Varanasi, after spending a couple of days at Varanasi, he went to Nepal and he reached this place called Bodh Gaya. So from Varanasi, he went by road to Nepal. So in Nepal, he wanted to learn from the Buddhist monks, and eventually he set out. He found a Buddhist monk that was ready to teach him Zen Buddhism. But this Buddhist monk was very, very strict. He told all of them, he had a batch of students, most of them from different countries around the world. He was very strict and he had a stick in his hand. Zen Buddhism teaches one to push all thoughts out. And Richard was fascinated by the levels of discipline that they were ready to undergo to calm their minds and to control their minds. And he was sitting there in the Zen meditation classes. And this Buddhist monk had told all of them, you have to sit in an erect posture for as many hours as I tell you, pushing away all your thoughts and keeping your mind very, very steady and focused. And this man walked around very strictly and very intensely carrying a stick. And anytime anyone bent even a little bit, they would get a whack on their backs with the stick. And this way, This man absolutely controlled every single person's, even the smallest of moments. Richard got so many beatings during those days while he was practicing Zen Buddhism. It was a course of for almost 2 weeks, an intense course of Zen Buddhism. And as Richard spent many days, and when he passed out, he moved out from that particular camp, and eventually he got to know from some other students that this master, he was very very strict with all of his students, but with himself he was very casual. He indulged in so many things that he never recommended others to indulge in. Richard understood that many of the students who believed in the Zen master for years together, they were heartbroken when they saw that this person spoke one thing and did something else. Um, so the thought process of spirituality is connected with consistency and steadiness. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, there is a story of Pralambasur. There was a demon in Vrindavan that came disguised as a gopa, as a coward boy. This demon, he dressed himself up as he looked exactly like one of the gopas, and he began to play around with the gopa, and he began to enjoy along with the gopas. But immediately Balaram, he understood that this person is not a gopa, but he's a demon who is disguised as a gopa. Balaram carried him. So they were playing a game, and in this game, whoever is the winner would be carried by the loser to a distance. So Balaram lost the game, and Pralambasur sat on the back of Balaram. And sorry, Balaram won the game, and Balaram sat on the back of Pralambasur. And Pralambasur, he took Balaram far away, and Balaram immediately understood that this is not a boy, a coward boy, but he's a demon. And Balaram waited for him to go a little away, and then he banged him on his head and killed him. Pralambasur represents hypocrisy. So the Pralambasur represents someone who dresses himself as a devotee, but he is not a devotee at heart. Externally, he looks like a devotee, but internally, he's not a devotee, he's a demon. So there is, in Sanskrit, there are two words, Satya and Mithya. Satya means truth, and Mithya means false. Satya and Mithya can't exist together. Either there is Satya or there is Mithya. Either there is truth or there is falsehood. And that is why, in the beginning stages of our life, pretense is okay. Like, say, for example, a child pretending to be sick. It's least harmful to society. It's not going to disturb anybody if a child is pretending to be sick. One time, a mother was telling her son, "Give me 2 reasons why you don't want to go to school." And the son said, "First reason, kids hate me. And second reason, teachers hate me." And the mother said, "Let me give you 2 reasons why you should go to school. First reason, you are 44 years old. And second reason, you are the principal of the school." If a child is pretending to be sick and not wanting to go to school, it's fine. It's not a problem. But here's an old person. He's 44 years old and he's crying, he's saying, "I don't want to go to school." That's not good, isn't it? So pretense, when it is in childhood, it is very innocent. But as we grow older, pretense is not so nice. What is expected is genuineness. And therefore, externally, we have to be what we are internally. A sannyasi should be like a carrot. The carrot is saffron outside and saffron inside. For a lot of people, they are saffron outside but white inside. And there are many grahasthas who are white outside but saffron inside. So the idea is that both a grahastha and a brahmachari have to be honest in one's service to Krishna. And that is what is the meaning of Satya or genuineness. And that is what attracts. And hypocrisy breaks hearts. So this particular Zen master was breaking bones of people, but eventually he broke the hearts of people also. So from there, Richard left Bodh Gaya, which is way up in Nepal. And from Nepal, he traveled to this fascinating place known as Calcutta. In those days, Calcutta was one of the most important cities of India. Now, much more important than Delhi also at that point in time, right? Um, in Calcutta, um, Richard came across so many new cultures. And one of the things that he got shocked by was this whole concept of um, Kali Puja. And when he saw that the way the whole idea of vegetarianism, so he was used to this whole idea of sadhus and people who are following the Sanatan Dharma, uh, living a life based on vegetarianism, particular way of looking at life. And when he came across Calcutta and he saw this whole Kali Puja thing and so many animals being slaughtered, he completely lost it. He was totally bewildered, not able to understand what is going on. And that's when he realized there are so many aspects of Sanatan Dharma, so many aspects of Hinduism. There are so many aspects of the same culture. I cannot understand it on my own. I need a teacher, I need a guide who can guide me on the details and intricacies of these scriptures. One scripture from the same faith recommending sacrifices, animal sacrifices, and another scripture recommending vegetarianism. So he was getting completely confused. And then he realized, I definitely need a guide who can help me go deeper and understand the philosophical truths. And that is when Richard decided to sincerely seek for a guide. Eventually, in Calcutta, he came across this very famous saint who was known as Mother Teresa. Um, he arrived at the convent of Mother Teresa, which was a simple one-story building, and he wanted to see who this person is, and he wanted to interact with her and learn from her. And when he reached this place, which was known as the Missionaries of Charity, he came across a sister who welcomed him, and he said, "Is it possible for me to meet, Mother Teresa?" So she welcomed him and she took him inside, and she said, "Mother Teresa, she's busy in her service." And then when Richard saw carefully, he saw she was engaged in cleaning pots in the kitchen, and he waited for a considerable period of time. And after she completed washing pots in the kitchen, then she came out and sat with him and spoke to him. And of the many things that she spoke, one of the things that she spoke really touched Richard's heart. The one thing that she spoke that really touched his heart was when she said, the greatest problem in this world is hunger. But it is not hunger of the stomach, it is a hunger of the heart. All over the world, both rich and poor are suffering. They are lonely and they're starving for love. And this one thing that Mother Teresa spoke really touched his heart. She told him, poverty is not only lack of a piece of clothing, but it is also a lack of human dignity, and it is the idea of purity. So she explained to him about how important it is to serve people and to help people come out from the poverty mentality, from the hunger of the heart through knowledge. Human life is never free from problems. We see that every day we feel hungry, and not feeling hungry is a disease. If you're hungry, then the problem is what to eat. But if you have food and eat the food, the problem is it tasty or is it satisfying? Is it hygienic? Because if it is not tasty, satisfying, and hygienic, it will cause food poisoning or any other disease. So, practically, with hunger and with food, there are so many problems associated with it. So, if you're not feeling hungry, that's also a disease. But if you're hungry and not getting any taste in the food, that is also a disease. But if you're getting taste and you eat too much, that will cause illness. That is also a disease. That means there is nothing in this world that will not cause problems. Hunger is not just physical in nature. Hunger is a mindset. In the scriptures, we find in every scripture, whether it is the Ramayana, whether it is the Bhagavatam, whether it is the Mahabharata, Puranas, you'll always find hungry people. Srimad Bhagavatam begins with Parikshit Maharaj being hungry and thirsty, and he sees Shamik Rishi sitting over there, and he's thirsty and he wants food and he wants water, and Shamik Rishi is not bothered. Out of that hunger and thirst, he puts a dead snake around his neck. And the same Parikshit Maharaj goes on, and for 7 days and 7 nights he doesn't eat, doesn't drink. What is this? In the forest, you will find sages who have conquered hunger. And in the same forest, you will find demons who are always hungry. What is this? This is a world in which all of us live in. If you conquer hunger, you actually conquered a lot in your life. Anyone who has conquered hunger is a very powerful person. And such people are called Maharaj. And such people are called sages. Because a sage is a person who has transcended hunger. Normal human beings, they're controlled so much by hunger. Their tongue and their belly dictates everything they do in their life. Out of hunger, people do anything and everything. But the real hunger is not the hunger of the belly, it's the hunger of the heart. When you satisfy that hunger, the external hunger of the belly can easily be dealt with. The sadhus don't focus on filling the hunger of the belly first. They spend a considerable amount of time dealing with the hunger of the heart. And when they gain knowledge and they spend considerable amount of time dealing with the hunger of the heart, then automatically they have a greater ability to deal with the hunger of the belly. And that is the realization that Richard carried from this particular experience. From Calcutta, there was a particular point in Richard's journey where he had to come back to Bombay. And the reason he had to come back to Bombay was because he had to renew his visa. So he had to get an extension for staying in India. At this point in time, he had almost been there for more than 5 months, and he needed to extend it. And he reached Bombay, and while he was roaming around in the streets of Bombay, the bustling city of Bombay, he one day came across a huge board that said "Special Spiritual Festival" in a place known as Cross Maidan. And Richard was very, very excited to visit this festival. And it was a 10-day long festival. And every day there was going to be a huge tent erected, and hundreds and thousands of people were going to visit. And there was a great sadhu was coming to speak. Richard was very eager and entered into this place, and slowly people had started gathering there. When he entered the place, he saw there was a book table there. And when he walked up to the book table, he saw the first thing that captivated his mind was a book and its cover. And the cover was the exact same photo of the little blue boy that he was carrying with him for so many months. And the book title read Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Richard, for the first time, he got a name to the photograph that he was carrying for so many months now. The Krishna. So he is called Krishna. He didn't even know that he is called Krishna. So while Richard was admiring this book, somebody walked up to him and he asked him, "You speak English?" And Richard said, "Yes, I am from America." And they introduced each other, and he said, "Really?" So this person who was asking him, he said, "You're not Indian. Are you a worshipper of Shiva?" He asked him. So Richard said, I don't really know what I am, but I lived with the Shaivites. So they got talking, and this person introduced himself as Tushtadas, and he introduced himself to the idea of Krishna and Shiva, and he pointed out to a particular chapter in this book, which shows the relationship between Krishna and Shiva. And he said, "Please read this chapter; you will understand." Richard took that book, embraced it very close to his heart, went and sat in one corner on the ground and began to read the book. And as he was reading the book, on the stage, very far away from where he was, a young lady began to sing beautiful bhajans and kirtans. And that was Yamuna Mataji who was sitting and leading there. Richard had no idea who these people were, but he just loved listening to her while he was reading the Krishna book. Eventually, another person came and sat right next to him, and they began to talk about Krishna and about spirituality. By that time, the pandal had begun to fill up. 25,000 people had gathered that night, uh, filled up the pandal to the brim. And while he was sitting there, reading the book and enjoying the kirtan that was going on the stage, he saw a very regal looking, elderly, aristocratic man walk onto the stage. And as soon as this person walked onto the stage, everyone stood up, and there was so much excitement, so much of shouting, and the kirtans, crescendo reached. The kirtan reached a crescendo, and at that point in time, this very elderly man sat on a vyasasan, on a big seat over there. And when he sat, everybody settled down. And this elderly man called one of his disciples, and he pointed out in the crowd, and he indicated something. And that Western disciple from the stage, he jumped off the stage, walked through the entire pandal, 25,000 people crossing, and he reached where Richard was. And after reaching Richard, he said, Swamiji is calling you on stage. Richard was fascinated. How did Swamiji see me from such a distance? And how did he recognize who I am? And Richard was just fascinated. He just walked behind this man who waded through the whole crowd and brought Richard back to the stage. And he made and Srila Prabhupada, Swamiji told Richard, "You can sit here and listen." And Richard sat right under the Vyasasan, the seat of Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada began singing Kirtan. The moment he began singing Kirtan, closing his eyes with rapt attention, he began to sing the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And Richard was shocked because this is the first time he was hearing the Hare Krishna Mahamantra being chanted by somebody else other than the Ganga. And he, great shock, he began to look at the person singing, and he was not able to fathom that is the same mantra that he had received from the river, and here he is receiving it hearing it from another person. And Srila Prabhupada sang Kirtan for a long time, and when he stopped, he began explaining. He said, "We are singing the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, or the great chanting for deliverance." He described each word of the Mahamantra, described Hare as invocation of Radha. He described Krishna as a name of God, which means all attractive. He described Rama means the supreme enjoyer, the giver of pleasure. And he said the entire Hare Krishna Mahamantra is a begging for asking God for service, to engage us in his service. Richard was just fascinated by the entire experience, sitting there under the feet of Prabhupada and listening to him carefully. From inside his heart, a voice came out and said, "This is your Guru." But Richard, he silenced that voice at that point. He said, "I want to be absolutely sure. Only when I'm absolutely sure that he's my Guru, I'll accept him as my Guru." But that voice kept coming again and again inside him, telling him, "This is your Guru." The spiritual master And the disciples' connection is a very divine one. It is something that is for lifetimes, and it's an eternal one. Once you accept somebody as a spiritual master, the relationship with the spiritual master never changes. For for the next so when that particular day the event got over, and after his lecture, as Srila Prabhupada was leaving, Prabhupada stopped directly in front of Richard, and spontaneously, without thinking, Richard reached out to touch the feet of Srila Prabhupada. He'd been living with the sadhus for so many years. He knew what the etiquette was. And someone loudly said, "No one touches Prabhupada's feet." Prabhupada. So Richard froze. He didn't want to offend anyone. But he looked up at Prabhupada, the great smile. Prabhupada very kindly and very mercifully said, "You can touch." And Richard, he bent down, touched the feet of Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada blessed him. And he told him that every day you can come here and sit next to me and hear. Every single day for the next 10 days, Richard came, and every day he sat on the stage along with Srila Prabhupada and heard the entire lecture and absorbed himself in the knowledge that Srila Prabhupada was giving. After the lecture got over, everybody dispersed that particular day, and Richard was roaming around. He started standing in the line of prasad. While everybody else was eating prasad, Richard thought, let me also stand in the line. And they were serving halwa prasad over there. And so Richard had just taken a plate filled with halwa and he was about to start eating. Somebody pulled that plate away from his hand. And he said, "You're going to eat this?" And he gave it away to somebody else and took Richard along with him. And they fed him a 12-course meal along with the devotees. And one devotee in that group, they told Richard, "You are a devotee. Someday you'll understand this." Richard didn't even know what that meant. And he didn't figure out what that really meant, till that point in time. And the next 10 days was very, very beautiful. He made so many friends among the disciples of Srila Prabhupada. At one point during the discussion, he realized that Shyamasundar Prabhu was one of Prabhupada's disciples. He was the one who had given him fruit salad in his hand in Amsterdam while there was this first interaction of the Hare Krishna devotees. But eventually he had lost all connection. And next was at this cross Maidan when the same Shyamasundar Prabhu was serving him prasad. Eventually, the 10 days were getting over. And Richard badly wanted that book, The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he had no money to buy it. So Richard began to beg on the streets of Mumbai to gather some money to buy this book of Srila Prabhupada. Eventually, on the last day, when Prabhupada met Richard, someone told Prabhupada, "Prabhupada, this boy is so eager to have your book that he is begging on the streets for raising some money to buy your book." Prabhupada was so pleased with Richard that he was actually, going out of the way to buy his Krishna book. Prabhupada gifted him the Krishna book, and Richard was so blissful receiving that beautiful gift. Each one of us, we are prioritizing something in our life. What are we begging for? Begging is not just a gross act of begging for something. It's a very subtle thing. It's a very, very subtle action of wanting or aspiring for something. Once, Krishna and Arjun, they were taking a walk. And as they were taking a walk, they came across an old Brahmana who was begging for alms. And Arjun gave him a bag of gold coins. And this man became overwhelmed with joy. And on his way home, he was robbed by a thief in the forest. And he cursed his fate. Next day again, he began to beg. Arjuna and Krishna were passing through the same way, and they saw this old man again, this Brahmana again begging. Arjun, he felt, "Arey." The Brahmana told him, "I lost my money, the thief stole it." And once again, Arjun took pity and gave him a large diamond. This man took it home and kept the diamond safely in an old pot that had not been used for many years, thinking that next day I will sell it and make money out of it. So next morning, before he could wake up, his wife went to fetch water from the river. But on her way back, she slipped and the pot broke. So she immediately went back home. She remembered that old pot at home. She took that old unused pot and filled it with water. When she put the pot into the river, the diamond slipped out into the river. And she returned home. The Brahman was searching desperately for that pot, and he saw the pot in her hand, and she realized he has lost the diamond also. Once again, the next day, this Brahmana was begging, and once again, Krishna and Arjun saw him. Arjun was shocked at hearing the unfortunate incident, and he told Krishna, "I don't think this man is destined to be blessed at all. So no matter how much I help him, nothing is working for him." He said, "I don't think I can help him anymore." And Krishna saw that scene and he gave the man 2 pennies, very insignificant amount of money. Brahmana took that and walked away. Arjuna asked Krishna, "My dear Krishna, I gave him gold coins, I gave him a bag of gold coins, I gave him such a big diamond that couldn't change his condition. And what is your 2 pennies going to do to him?" Krishna smiled. He said, "Let's see." The man walked home. As he was walking home, cursing his destiny, cursing his fate, he saw at that point there was a fisherman who had just caught a fish. And the fish that he had brought out was struggling, flapping, he was struggling for its life. This old Brahmana felt a little bad for the fish. He gave the 2 pennies to this man and he said, "Just let this fish go. Let me just save this creature." He purchased the fish and he was about to throw the fish into the water and he realized that the fish had something in his mouth that was strangling it, because of which it was breathless. The old man put his hand inside the mouth of the fish and pulled out what was stuck. And he realized it was the diamond that he had thrown, that had gone into the river by mistake. And he began to shout out, "Look what I found! Look what I found!" At that exact time, there was a thief who had robbed the man was passing by, and he heard the shouts of the man. And the thief realized, maybe the man has found me out. And he ran to this man, begged forgiveness, and returned the bag of gold coins and ran away. The Brahmana now was happy. He had the diamonds and the bag of gold coins. He went straight to Arjuna and told him everything that happened. And Arjuna was shocked. He told Krishna, "Krishna, what is this? How is it that my gold and my diamond did not help him, but your 2 pennies helped him?" And Krishna gave him a fascinating reply. He said, when he had gold and diamonds, he was only thinking of himself and his needs. But when he had only 2 pennies, he began to think about the needs of other people. Many times in life, when we have a lot, we don't value what we have with us. We don't really understand how what we have with us is so important and how we can use it to the best possible way. And we start looking for all frivolous ways of using that. But when we really don't have anything, that's when we beg for the most important thing of our lives. Richard, here in the story, we find he had nothing with him. But that's when he realized that Krishna book is the most valuable thing that he can ever have in his life. And he's ready to beg on the streets for that Krishna book. Many times we have the Krishna book lying with us, probably dusting over years. We don't understand the value of it because we didn't have to beg for Krishna. We didn't have to beg for getting that book. It just came, many times for free. In marathon, somebody gave it to us. On our birthday, somebody gave it to us. And when we didn't have to put so much of effort in getting that, naturally, we take it for granted. Richard, at this point in time, he decided to move from Mumbai to a few other destinations, and then he eventually got someone inspired him to go to Goa, and he said, "You must see Goa." So Richard, he was helped by a ship ticket to Goa. So he traveled from Mumbai by boat towards Goa, and he lived on the beachfront in Goa for almost quite some days, several days. He lived at the beachfront over there, and as he was living on the beachfront, he was seeing this fascinating ocean, beautiful beaches, almost nothing there. And his daily meal, he would climb up a coconut tree and bring one coconut down hit that coconut repeatedly on a stone till it broke. And from that coconut, he would drink the water and he would eat the pulp of the coconut. And that was what he subsisted on for as many days as he lived in Goa. One day, as he was walking on the coastline of Goa, he saw something very strange. He saw that from the waters had brought in a fish. And this fish was flapping and struggling for life. He took the little fish and threw it back into the water. In a few seconds, the fish came back, brought in by the waves. And first time when he picked up the fish was very insecure of being in the hands of a stranger, and it jumped out by itself. They eventually gathered it, put it back into the water. Only the water brought him back. So every time Richard was putting the fish into the water, that is coming back. And this time he decided, I am going to go deep. He went up to his knees into the water and threw the fish. The wave again brought the fish out. And this time, he picked up the fish and walked right into the water till he was neck deep into the water, and then threw the fish into the water. And then he came back to the shore and he found the fish hadn't come back. The fish had found its home, the water. And then as he was going out, from that particular place, he was walking towards, the beach. Just a few steps away, he saw there was a group of fishermen that were fishing. That cast a large net, and thousands of these fishes were gathered together, and so many of them were dead. And that is when Richard had a very profound realization in his life. He said, he felt, we are all like this fish that have been separated from the sea of divine consciousness. For a person to be happy outside his or her natural relationship with God, it's like a fish trying to enjoy life outside the water or the dry sand. Holy people go to great extent to help even one person to return to its original natural spiritual consciousness, to the sea of true joy. But the net of Maya or illusion snatches away the mind of the masses, diverting them from our true self interest. Actually, if you really see, this is the reality of life. Most of us, we are like fish out of water. Till the point of time we come to the path of Krishna consciousness, we feel something is missing in life. So the moment we find the path of spirituality, of Krishna consciousness, suddenly realize this is what I've been missing all my life. And then the spiritual master, the guru, is like that saintly person trying to put us back into the water. And we are like the stupid fish trying to come out again and again. In the beginning stages of our spiritual life, we are not interested in spiritual life because we don't realize that that is what our true nature is. We keep coming out again and again and again. The spiritual master doesn't give up and finally puts us deep inside till we develop taste for the holy name, until we develop taste for spiritual life. But in the meanwhile, Maya is casting nets and bringing thousands of people, thousands of fishes out, and completely captivated in its net of Maya. Richard, from that point, he traveled back to the Himalayan range. Especially, he reached a place which was known as Dharmashala. So he went back from Goa to Bombay. He got his visas renewed, and then he prepared his journey to go back to the Himalayas. He had to cut short the journey of the Himalayas because of the visa renewal. So he had to come back all the way from the Himalayan ranges, all the way to Bombay, just to get his visa renewed. And that's when the detour to Goa happened. And then when he went back all the way to the Himalayas, he reached this place known as McLeodganj. And in McLeodganj, he specifically wanted to meet His Holiness the Dalai Lama, the leader who had carried deep compassion and steady joy despite so much of exile and loss. Richard realized that Dalai Lama's strength did not come from his position and followers or any kind of external identity, but it came from his inner friendship with silence. At that point in time, Richard decided, after having this beautiful conversation with the Dalai Lama, that he wanted to spend some time with himself. And he realized that I need some solitude. He has been in the chaos of Mumbai. He had been in the Goa and so many of these places in Delhi and all. He just sought deeply sought for solitude in his life. At that point, he found a cave, and in that cave, Richard spent considerable amount of time in solitude, trying to gather himself and trying to explore what he really wanted to and yearned for in life. Most of us treat our brain like dustbin. We keep consuming content, and we consume content as if our brain can take consistently for hours. What do you expect your brain to work creatively, and how do you expect your brain to work creatively when it is being filled with garbage, and junk? So just like eating junk food constantly doesn't give you a healthy body, similarly consuming junk worthy content does not make you smart. And therefore one has to learn how one should align with solitude. um, every day we should sit for a few minutes with no one around us and just write down one or two things that you think you don't like about yourself, and why don't you like those things about yourself. So learn to first understand yourself first. See, if we don't belong to ourselves, we won't belong to anybody else. Learn to belong to yourself without feeling the need to be with others. The problem with most of us is that we are not comfortable with ourselves. And the reason we are not comfortable with ourselves is because we get scared of being alone. But when it comes to spiritual life, there is a difference between loneliness and solitude. Being alone is a part of life, but being lonely means viewing yourself from the lens of sympathy and misery. When you look at yourself through the lens of loneliness, you feel insecure and left out. You start thinking there is something wrong with you, and that lowers your self esteem. You start feeling that the time you spend with yourself as a bad thing. That's loneliness. And that has nothing to do with you being alone. That just defines what you think of yourself. Great people always spend time with themselves because that is when they discover who they are. There is a difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is when you are surrounded by people, but you still feel lonely. Solitude is when you are alone, absolutely alone, but still feel surrounded by so many powerful energies around you. And that is what solitude is. In the ancient times, brahmacharya, every person would have to spend certain amount of time in the gurukul of the teacher, learning to embrace solitude. When you are not scared of being alone, you will use time very wisely, even when you're alone. And when you don't understand the value of solitude, even when you are with people, you will end up wasting time only. And that's the difference between solitude and loneliness. Richard eventually from McLeodganj, he reached a place which is in the state of Haryana, known as Patankot. And from there, he went to Kurukshetra. Right under the tree in which Krishna spoke the Gita to Arjun, Richard sat and read Bhagavad Gita for the first time in his life. And eventually, from there, went to the valley of Kulu in Himachal Pradesh. One day, while he was walking on the streets of Kulu in Himachal Pradesh, um, he suddenly felt someone attacking him, literally holding him by the neck. And he didn't experience anything like this till now. Suddenly, somebody held him by the neck and pierced something into his ears. And before Richard could even react to it, Richard was carrying a bag of spiritual books. And even before Richard could react to that, suddenly this man had pierced something into his ears. And he kept poking his ears for some time and then pulled out something. And the moment he pulled it out, big chunk of ear wax that came out with that, with that particular stick that was put in. He was really shocked and puzzled at how could so much of earwax be inside his ears. And suddenly, when this man left him, he was, one year seemed absolutely clear, and the other year seemed very, very filled up. You could make out the difference, like a lack of balance between the two. And suddenly, Richard had a very, very powerful realization. He said, the dirty wax of egotism accumulated in the heart prevents us from clearly hearing the Lord's voice within. A guru with a stick of knowledge cleanses our hearts. It's really ugly to see what may come out, but following patiently, we keep getting cleansed. Each one of us carry a lot of ear wax in our hearts. And what is that ear wax? That ear wax essentially is ego. No matter who you are, even if you're a beggar on the street, you're very proud of being a beggar. Even if you're a CEO of an organization, you have the pride of being a CEO. The world is like a washing machine where ego is crushed badly. Every relationship ends because of problems with the ego. When we transform that ego to real ego, we learn to serve God and others. Where we are willing to bend down. Without bending, it is impossible to transform ego into humility. And the whole mood of spirituality is to help us let go of that ego. The wax of ego prevents us from hearing carefully the message of God. It prevents us from understanding the message of God. Richard learned a very critical lesson at that particular point from the wax coming out from his ears. So this helps us understand the journey of Richard from the Himalayan jungles all the way to Mumbai and then back to the Himalayas again, where so many powerful lessons have been learned. I am hoping and praying that this journey of His Holiness Radhanath Swami through these most fascinating stories is inspiring us in our own journey of life. And hopefully, we are growing and learning to progress in our own journey through these powerful, instructive stories. Thank you very much for joining in. Many of you who have already heard the first 3 sessions, wonderful, and I'm very happy that you are consistently hearing. For those who have not heard the first 3 sessions, please go back and catch up on the recordings of the first 3 sessions, especially the second and third session for those who have not heard as yet. I'm sure many of you all have been busy with Diwali and with Yatra and so many things. Please spend the next 1 week hearing these the missed classes. Next Friday, we are not going to be having a class since I'm traveling. But the Friday after that, we'll resume the course. So you have practically 14 days to catch up on the 3 sessions, the 4 sessions that we have done so far. And post that, we'll meet back again and continue the Journey Home course. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.